Welcome back, players and collectors, to my channel, Ren's Collectibles. Today we're going to be talking about something that I haven't seen too many people really talking about, and that is the price to be competitive in Lorcana versus the other big TCGs. So we're going to be taking a look at the last couple DLCs for Lorcana, the Atlanta and Chicago, to kind of see what the meta breakdowns are, each deck that broke down. And then we're going to be looking at Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, and Yu-Gi-Oh! To see price of decks and see how much money do you actually have to spend to be competitive in a tournament. So not wasting any time, let's dive into the breakdown. Alright, so if we look over here, this is TCG Player. This is like their blog area, and you can see they got blogs for just the main games up here. I guess they have some other ones too, but we're gonna use mostly TCG Player. We're gonna use sites that are commonplace for people to use for price checking on, you know, some of these cards and such. With TCG Player kind of being the standard for all games, I tried to use this as much as I could. But we're going to look at Lorcana first. You know, as it comes to card values and all that, everybody wants to get into gameplay and stuff, but the question that everybody asks, I mean, like, seeing it in locals even, you know, how expensive is it to get into play? And it varies, right? Just like every other TCG, it varies. But if you want competitive decks, you're going to be shelling out some cash. So right here, I have the most recent blog update for TCG players as it pertains to Lorcana, and this is about the top decks from Chicago's DLC, the Lorcana Challenge. So Chicago just happened a week ago, last weekend, and the winner here, we got Brian Cortade, or Cortade. I'm not sure. Sorry if you watch this and I mispronounced your name. I apologize. He ran the Emerald Steel discard deck, and you can see right here the total market price according to TCG Player for his 60 card deck was $733.79. Whew, that's pricey. That is pricey. And that's kind of like where we're getting into, I hate to say it, but Lorcana is quickly becoming one of the pricier games to play. It kind of was from the start, right? There was so much collector hype, and, you know, getting enchanteds and legendaries were always expensive, especially the ones that you could play with. They were always very expensive, and prices have been gradually, I don't want to say dropping, but they're stabilizing, right? But you figure something like Beast, the tragic hero here, he's $55.60 per card. You're running 4 copies of this in a deck, you're already at $200+ $220 just on the Beast alone. And there's a few cards that are kind of up there. You know, you got Robin Hood, $38.23. There's Diablo, everybody's favorite Diablo, $48.67. You've got Ursula, Deceiver of All, $31.44. So, I mean, overall, most of your cards are pretty good price-wise. But there's 4 cards that are over $30 in value, and you're running 4 copies of each. That is where 700 of your $733 are coming from. But it's still the fact that, like, this guy just won a challenge, a regional event. If you're, you know, a Pokemon guy, you know, regional events. And we're going to get to Pokemon here soon too, don't you worry. But a $733 deck won the whole tournament, which is just absurd. It's insane. You think about the value of it and you go, that should happen because they spent so much money on it. You hate to see that it happens that way though. But the second place deck, the runner-up, Jordan Moore, ran an Emerald Amethyst Bounce Tempo, and that deck only ran $298.49. Now, don't get me wrong, that's still pricey. You know, $300 for a deck of 60 cards is pretty pricey still. But you're paying $400 something less, and you still got second place. It's pretty good. That's what kind of gives me hope a little bit, is the fact that you could go from a super expensive deck to a, let's say, mid-tier expensive deck. That, I mean, you can almost buy 2 of these decks for the price. Actually, you can buy 2 of these decks for the price of the first place deck, which is just nuts. And the biggest one here being, you've got Diablo, 4 copies of Diablo, and then, you know, 3 of the Queen's Castle here. Oh, that is strange. I think that's the first time I've seen a location card stretched wrong. That's interesting. But yes, so you know, you've got some better options up here with this kind of stuff. And I think I think it's all kind of the same around here. Third place deck was $396.07, which obviously goes up about $100 from the second place deck. They had a couple copies of stuff. Maleficent. I always struggle with saying Maleficent. I always want to say Maleficent. That's not right. And then you got Sisu, 4 copies. Maui, Hero to All. Be Prepared. I mean, this is a really well-rounded out deck. Lucky Dime. But, you know, when you just add all of the copies, all of the numbers to it, it gets a lot. And then you have the 4th place deck, which this is what most people are probably looking for the range of. $175. $174.43 to be exact. This is the 4th place deck. And this is reasonable. This, to me, for a TCG in a competitive scene, is very, very reasonable. I honestly think somebody like me who just doesn't spend a ton of money on making decks competitive, which sounds kind of wrong, right, as a player, but, you know, I don't want to drop $700+ on a single deck. That's just, I could buy a few decks at that point. Granted, I might not ever win a regional or a challenge or anything like that, but just the fact that somebody is playing a really good deck and playing it well for $174 makes it interesting, to say the least. So those are your top 4 decks. But what we're gonna do is look over at Atlanta as well, because we do have some stuff here from Atlanta. Now this one is a fan, or I forgot who it was. Somebody put this Google Excel sheet together of all the decks, and all the prices are in Dreamborn, which uses TCG player prices, I'm pretty sure. So when you look at some of these as well, this kind of gives you the breakdown. By the way, Dreamborn is a really good way to build decks and kind of see what's going on with them, see your breakdowns of everything, and then see values as well. But even like right here, if I were to, you know, let's go ahead and click on it. It tells you right here, it's all TCG player. Oh, you guys can't see, my camera's in the way. This is TCG player, and you can just pick however many of each, and you know how you want them. So these are TCG player prices, but you can see the top winning deck at Atlanta was $430. Not nearly as bad as the $700 deck, but not great either. And then, oh, that was a second place deck. I am so sorry. That is the second place deck. The first place deck was not in here. But the third place deck, let's look at that one. $195. That's pretty reasonable. Pretty reasonable. It's actually not a bad deck, to be completely honest. I might run something like this soon, because I was building a Merlin deck and I was just trying to shake it up a little bit. But if you look on here, just some of the top decks, which one is this? Number 8. Yeah, 189. So you can be super competitive and spend tons of money and you're gonna win, or you at least have a really good chance to win, right? But you can also not spend that much money and just play, you know, something a little bit more fun, a little bit cheaper. And it's funny because this deck name right here says Great Value Brand. That's the title of the deck. So that kind of tells you right there, this is the Great Value version, but if you pilot it well, you can get in and, you know, really place well at some of these tournaments. I will say that with Lorcana, it's kind of hard to gauge still at this point, because we've only had, what, 2 American challenges, so they're still very new. The meta's still very fresh and kind of ever evolving. But you can kind of see that the prices are a little bit all over the place. You're gonna be spending a couple $100 on a deck for a challenge if you want to play competitively, though. And the reason at the very beginning I said it kind of hurts a little bit is because you know that as the meta evolves, as more people come to challenges, so in the coming years, as these challenges grow and more people get in, I hope it's not this way, but I feel like it's kind of going to go the Magic the Gathering route, where more and more decks that make the top cut are going to be pricier decks, right? It makes sense that way because obviously those are the better cards. But when you compare it to something like Pokemon, for example, right here I have NAIC, which is the North American International Championships, 2024 in New Orleans. This was literally a week ago. You can see all the decks here. This is Limitless TCG, by the way. If you want to see all these deck lists, I highly recommend my Pokemon players. But if you can like click on these decks and look right here to TCG player, this top deck that just won a Continental International Championship only costs $73.64. That's a huge drop off from what Lorcana was. You're not going to find these kinds of decks in Lorcana that are just competitive, and I hate to say it that way, but it's true. Look at this second place deck, $44.47. This is a Gardevoir EX deck, and out of the top 8 in this exact tournament, I want to say 6 or 7 were running this very similar Gardevoir EX deck with Monkey Dory. So I'm pretty sure I can click on all these decks and they're going to be just about the same. $46. Let's go here, $49. So you can kind of see the trend here. $49. Oh, that might be the same one. $43. These are all the top 8 decks. $73 with the Lost Zone box. Even when you get down here to like Snorlax Control, which played, what was it, 11th? $45. You want to get something a little bit more expensive. This is the deck that I run when I play Pokemon. It's the Charizard Pidgeot, $77.77. Those are some of the pricier decks, and these are all very, very competitive decks. These are the decks that are winning tournaments constantly. Charizard, Gardevoir, Lost Box. I mean, even that Snorlax Stall just won overseas. So Pokemon is just super, super cheap, and I hate to compare other TCGs to it, but I would argue it's the most competitive TCG out there. You know, Pokemon tournaments are just as big, if not bigger, than Magic tournaments and Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments, and I know there's gonna be Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh players that argue, and who knows, maybe there's some that are actually bigger than these Pokemon ones, but I mean, Pokemon's consistently drawing 2,000 people to these tournaments every time, multiple tournaments a year. It's kind of hard to argue its supremacy in the the competitive scene, but the fact that these decks are so competitive, so good, top tier decks, and they're not even $100 is just wild, especially when you go back and compare it to some of these decks here that are, you know, 4th place is $174. You're talking $100 more than one of the top decks in Pokemon. Here, you've got a $396 deck when the top deck in Pokemon was $49. Like, that's just nuts. It is absolutely nuts. And then we switch things over. This is Magic the Gathering. So I think this was from one of the more recent Magic tournaments. This has a card breakdown. This is MTG Goldfish, I believe. Yeah, MTG Goldfish, which is not TCG player, but it's the one that all Magic players use. So this is kind of their standard here. You're talking $300 right there. And I believe if we go back here, look at that, 8% of the meta is this, and it's, oh, that now it says 469. I wonder why. Huh, I don't know what the difference is. Oh, maybe that was a high end. So I guess the 6-0 starter Esper mid-range was $457, but it's averaging between all the decks, it averages out to about $280. Let's look at the top one, 15% mono, red, aggro. I mean, that's actually not bad, rounding out or averaging between $75, but some of these top decks here are $234, $99. Kind of gets a little bit cheaper. So Magic's actually not doing too bad. But when you look at some of the higher end stuff, and it's, 200, 400, just about 300, almost 500, 150, 430, these decks are all some of the most competitive decks. And this is for standard format, by the way. This is not Commander. I don't even want to touch Commander. I don't even want to touch it, because I know some of the most competitive decks in Commander are hundreds of dollars, if not thousands. It just gets mind-blowing, staggeringly mind-blowing at that point. And it's nuts to think that people spend that kind of money on a single deck to go play. I just don't have fun at that point. If I'm playing so competitively that I need to have the top dollar decks to compete, I'm not having fun. So that's me personally, but it's wild to see the price variances here. And then we can even look at Yu-Gi-Oh! This is TCG Player again. This is one of their blogs from one of their tournaments that happened, I want to say a month or two ago. And this was the top deck. This was first place right here. $658. So pretty comparable to where the Lorcana deck is, about $100 cheaper, a little bit less than $100 cheaper. But you got, a couple copies of a few different higher end cards here. Oops. $45, $26, $44, $26, $110. You had one copy of this. That's nuts. And then even it's kind of the same as you go down. $638 for the third place deck. Did I miss the second place deck? They just don't have the second place deck. But still, third place, $638. And I think this was... Oh no, this is 9th through 16th place. So I guess a lot of decks ran this one. $448. So you're talking a few $100s for some competitive Yu-Gi-Oh decks as well. It's kind of mind-blowing to think that out of these 4 TCGs we just showed off, and these are arguably the top 4 TCGs of all time. And I'm including Lorcana in there because that's obviously the whole point of this video. But when you throw Lorcana in there, it's the second priciest next to Yu-Gi-Oh! Barely edges out Magic, I would say. I think Lorcana's pricier a little bit more than Magic is right now. But I still have to put that asterisk up there because a lot of people just don't play Standard anymore. They play Commander. And Commander is... Let's click it. Oh my god. Look at this. Aragorn King right here, $1,000. Eris, Roar of the Storm, $858. Now there are some that are, cheaper, $204, $528, $351. $1,200, $775, $1,600. Like, this is just unbelievable. So if you take the actual top format of Magic and compare it to Lorcana, then this is the most expensive out of all 4 games. But when you look at standard format, it's not the same tale. It's still pretty pricey, but all that to say, as much as I love Lorcana and I'm really, really getting into it, and this is not to, persuade anybody to not play competitively or anything like that. It is expensive. It is, especially if you want to play like a top tier deck, it's gonna get pricey, and you need to know that kind of coming out of the gates, that you're either gonna drop some money to be competitive or just get creative, because again, Lorcana's so new. The meta is all changing and ever evolving because there's such a small pool of cards to pull from right now that there's no real emergence on what the meta is. Even though I know Bucky and Diablo players are arguing their supremacy right now. They'll come and go, they'll fade just like all the others, but cards that are competitive, especially as the card pool widens and gets more and more, I think the prices of cards are only going to go up for competitive play. So hopefully I'm wrong in this evaluation here, but I was just looking at the numbers and I just had to say something, because I know people are asking, and I haven't seen a lot of people really talking about breaking down to the dollars how much it truly costs to get into Lorcana and be kind of competitive, you know? So as compared to the other TCGs, Lorcana in a standard format is the second most expensive out of the four. You could argue the whole commander thing again, and it's still number 3. It's not even the least expensive, you know, and it's not even close. Pokemon is the cheapest by far. So take with that what you will. I just kind of wanted to put it out there to give people an idea of what to expect. But again, Lorcana new. The meta is not really set in stone. It's kind of changing all the time, and like you said, there's some variance in the decks here. You got a $195 deck, you know, placing in top 32 or 12 or whatever it was for him. And oh, by the way, this is Zach Bivens' deck, this Merlin deck. So there you go. I know a lot of people were following him. He finished first in day 1 at the Chicago Challenge. But then you had your top deck that actually won was $730 something. So huge variation there, but just know that you're going to be spending probably a couple $100 on a deck for competitive gameplay. But you guys let me know down in the comment section below. What do you think? Do you think that the competitive scene is going to stay kind of pricey like this? Do you think this is just because the game is still new and things are trying to figure themselves out, or, you know, what's the case? What do you think the case is? And then also, if you're not a Lorcana player, tell me what game you play and if this kind of a breakdown sways you at all. It tells you to come in or not. You know, let me know in the comments below. But that's all we have time for today. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. We'll see you in the next video.